Hey guys, it's Alan making another video for BluefirePoker. Today I'm doing part 2 of my series, Stat Usage and Gameplay. Hopefully you watched the first video, so I'm not going to go through the introduction again. Let's just get started replaying hands. This particular spot we're faced with a button open from a player that doesn't appear to be very solid. Sample size is a little bit limited, but the stats are far enough off at this point that I assume that their ranges are wide and they're probably not that tough an opponent. So I go ahead and cold call here with something that's a little bit outside my normal range. Non-suited Broadway two-gapper. I generally don't think it's going to play very well out of position, but against a wide enough range and someone who's not super strong, skill-wise, it'll certainly be fine. I get an interesting flop. A queen will give me an open-ended straight draw. I've got an overcard. Additionally, I have an opponent who does not c-bet very much. Now, part of that's nice, because if they c-bet, then I can give them credit for a hand, and then I probably have to end up folding this. But the nice part is he's going to give me lots of free cards in order to catch the best hand. But he's also going to be getting those same free cards as far as if he checks back and whatever he may have, he's going to have 7.5 to 15% equity, possibly even more. I don't really want to give that away. Additionally, over the sample size we have so far, his full versus flop c-bet has been 67%. And one of the things I want to address in this, and I did some of this in the first video, is how to look at other stats how to look at, in one situation, how to turn to other stats to kind of figure out how an opponent plays this spot, because certain spots are going to have sample size much quicker than other spots. So when it comes to donk betting over 100 hands, we're not going to have any sample size, but folding versus flop c-bet, particularly when this guy's probably calling a ton of hands, is going to start kicking in pretty quick. And so the fact that he's been folding 67% of the time to a flop c-bet would indicate that he probably folds pretty well to a donk bet. So in addition to not giving away equity, I also feel like a donk bet in this spot is going to fold out some ace highs that obviously beat me. I don't know what it's going to do to a hand like pocket fives. Maybe he folds, maybe he doesn't. That's a little bit unsure here. We just don't have a big enough sample size to see how frequently he's really folding on the flop, but at least we can get rid of some ace highs and not give him that free card. So I donk 8 into 13. He calls. The jack pairs here on the turn, and I believe I go ahead and bet again. I think this is a really bad bet on my part. All my reasons for betting pre-flop, I'm betting on the flop was, well, I mean, not all my reasons, but one of my big reasons was the guy was folding a lot, so we could get him to fold out a lot of his air. And so when I'm barreling here, I'm basically, trying to rep a jack and trying to get the guy to fold a made hand, and I think that's a massive mistake on this part. Now, some argument could be made that I do beat straight draws, I beat a lot of flush draws, and so it can be a bit of a defensive bet there. But I think it's better just to check here, and hopefully he checks back. But trying to get this guy off a hand, I don't think it's ever going to work, and I just don't know if enough draws make up his range that I can make some sort of argument that this is some sort of quasi value protection type bet. Additionally, on the river, I mean, I'm not going to be able to do anything but check fold on the river, and so he's going to be able to move me off my hand on the river anyway. Although when we get to river play, I'm going to talk about a stat there that makes that unlikely. So on the river, hearts get there, and so do my king. I don't see any value there in betting here and trying to get a call out of 9x. I just think the range of worse hands that I get value from here is just way too narrow. But as a bonus, and this is a small sample size, but I still have to take this into pretty strong consideration, is his bet river is extremely low. Now, as I've mentioned in many of my videos, is I don't use aggression stats ever. In fact, I've never used them. I mean, aggression stats have been around for since HUDs were invented. In fact, it was one of the main numbers that got put on there, and I think that's mainly why aggression stats kind of are still around today. It's just because they've always been around, and people kind of got used to seeing them there and using them. But in my opinion, aggression stats are just to what I would call a blunt stat. It just doesn't tell me enough how a player plays. We have all the information in a decently constructed HUD to tell us what they're doing in every spot. How often are they folding, on the flop? How much are they c-betting on the flop? How much are they raising the flop? And it's through that information. That information is going to give us a much more accurate picture of what sort of frequencies they have in different spots, rather than just saying, oh, their aggression is this number, so they're capable of bluffing. I mean, that's probably true, but I just think that's a really inaccurate way of going about it. And so when it comes to river play, a number I look at a lot is the bet river number. Now, this is a bit of a blunt number. It's just given the opportunity, how often do they bet the river? But you find a lot of players are at the extreme at this number. Now, this particular player is at the low extreme. They only have a 13% bet river. Now, this is admittedly a small sample size, but a 13% bet river is so absurdly low that there's almost no way. I mean, if this number is anywhere close to accurate, he can't value bet worse. And I mean, given everything else we know, there's just no bluffs in his range. But even if there were bluffs, even if it was possible for him to have a hand that needed to be bluffed, his numbers indicating that he can't, that he doesn't bluff very frequently here. So this for me is a pretty easy just check fold in this spot. And talking about bet rivers, we see kind of a range here. We have this reg with 29, this reg with 40, this reg with 38. When it comes to bet river and reg play, generally you're going to find most regs are going to be somewhere 24 to 35%. 29% is really solid. They have some capability of bluffing and or value betting thin, but not at a super high frequency. These guys that start climbing up to close to 40%, yeah, they're doing some thin value betting, and they're doing a decent amount of bluffing, and so it just becomes a lot easier to identify who you should be bluff catching against, and then who you should be getting out of the way of. And particularly when it comes to regs, and you get guys in the middle 20s, 24, 25, 26%, you should be getting out of the way quite a bit on the river. Alright, here's another mildly interesting hand. I open up, fairly wide on the button. As I've talked about in previous videos, I use an opponent's position-specific folds versus button steals, and in this particular combination here, I'm pretty much going to be opening up any two cards because both my opponents are folding at a fairly high frequency. So 10-7 off would be a super clear open. So I open, and this player donks out to me, and this is another spot where, well, not another spot, but this is where stats come into play, trying to figure out how frequently does a guy donk, and then what can you do about it. Now we can see in this particular spot, now this is flop donk only, he donks 17% of the time, which is really, really high. I actually donk more than this, but I'm a huge donker, and I think if you don't donk a lot, it's something you should think about. In fact, that's maybe I should just do a video just on good spots to donk out on the flop, because I think there's a bunch of places that it works really well at. And you can look at our opponents here. This guy's 17%, this guy's 0%, this guy's 0% over 1,400 hands, and you're going to find a lot of players that just don't use the donk at all. They're going to have a donk of 4 or 5%, and I'm going to give them full credit for their donk. For example, if this 0% guy donked out at me, I mean, I'm just going to have to give him credit, and I mean, if I've got some sort of overpair, that's probably not a fold I can make, but I'm going to be playing very, very cautious at this spot, because if he never donks, or if he rarely donks, just hard to give him much of a bluffing frequency. But to the player in question, we have a 17% donk here. We have a flop that is difficult for me to have hit. In, in fact, when this player donks out at me, I'm folding 0% of my range here. It's just a question of what I'm going to do versus him. Now, in this particular situation, I actually have a hand, so it makes calling much easier. Now, if I didn't have a hand, I would look and see what information I can gather about my opponent as to how does he respond to raises. Like I could do his donk pop up, and the fifth number down is fold donk versus a raise. We have no information as far as that goes. We could also look at his fold flop c bet versus raise, which as I've talked to before, certain numbers are compatible simply because there's a similar philosophy between their actions. And so if I didn't have any information as to how often a player would donk fold, I would go to look and see how often he would c-bet and then fold to a raise. And if that number was high, then I would assume that that he's probably folding. He's probably donk folding at a decent frequency. Once again, we don't have a lot of good information here. Uh, he's folded versus a raise out of position 1 out of 2 times versus a check raise 1 out of 3 times. Kind of leaning towards that he's not a great folder. However, if I had air here, a float does become a bit problematic. And when I think about bluff raising a versus a donk bet versus floating, something I'll look at a lot is just their turn barrel frequency, which I think is related to how bluffy they are in a donk situation. So somebody with a lowish double barrel, I would think a float would be a better play because I just don't think they have it in them to fire multiple shots on a bluff. Where if they have a higher turn barrel, I'd be more likely to believe that they can do that, and so I would have to consider taking a raise line there. But as it is, I have a pair here, so pretty easy call. Now he checks the turn. Now a while back, I don't know, a couple years ago, I would always check back on this spot. I just had this irrational fear that players were trapping me way too often, and they would have something like pocket eights here, or ace seven, or something along those lines, and I would just be value cutting myself way too often. And I never gave enough consideration to the issue of equity giveaway, which I've already talked about some in this series. Is there's a lot of spots where you need to bet, where you are going to be value cutting yourself. Sometimes you are going to be getting trapped, but your opponent is going to have between 3 and 6 outs almost always versus you, and if you check back, you allow them that free equity, that portion of the pot. Those are actual dollars that you're giving away. I mean, you're not always going to lose the hand because they're not always going to catch up, but over the long haul, that is money that you're giving up. And I've come to the point where I believe pretty strongly that the equity giveaway is giving away way more value than the times you're getting trapped here. And it's not impossible that if I bet here, I get called by a hand that I am actually ahead of. Yeah, 15 into 26, nice blocking bet. Queen comes on the river. I think at this point I probably have the best hand. If I bet again, it starts to become a question of, what do I get value from? I mean, obviously another seven's going to split. Is he calling here with pocket sixes or less, or ace high? That gets to be really, really questionable. And this is a stat I've not talked about in this series, but I think is really, really important to think about when you're thinking about making thin value. In this situation, thin value, or in other situations, thinking about running a river bluff, is looking at their showdown frequency. How often do they go to showdown? Now, this particular player is only going to showdown 22% of the time, which would indicate that they're doing more folding than the average reg, or they're doing more betting than the average reg. So if they're doing more betting, then that means they're basically forcing their opponents off of hands, and so their showdown is especially low. Generally speaking, I find that when a showdown's low, it's because they're doing a lot of folding. Now, more moderate showdowns can be tricky. Say a player has a 25% went to showdown. Uh, uh, he could be doing a lot of pushing players around, thus forcing folds and not going to showdown, but also not be bluffable at all. They're kind of balancing each other out in that he appears to have a reasonable went to showdown, but not as bluffable as you would think. And I'm generally not trying to bluff 25% went to showdowners that much. But when I see guys that are like this guy 22% and this guy over here 20%, then I tend to think those guys are fairly bluffable. Now I also look at their raising numbers and their barreling numbers and kind of use that to kind of weigh the information a little bit. And if their barrels are especially high, like this guy, his showdown's only 20% and his barrels are high, his raises are pretty low. His bet river's pretty reasonable, so he's doing some like triple barreling and probably pushing guys around a little bit there. But in general, he's just not pushing guys off of hands that much, and probably getting pushed off of hands quite a bit. And this is a little bit of a going off on a little bit of a sideline here. If you want a little bit of confirmation of their numbers, you can look at their one at showdown. So I pop this up, and I can look at how often they won at showdown down there at the bottom of the SPARK graphs. These SPARK graphs that you see at the bottom here are part of NoteCaddy. I've talked about that in the previous videos. I'm not going to get into that now. But for example, this guy, when he went to showdown overall, he's winning 53% of the time. When I exclude small pots, no small pots, he's winning half the time. This sample size is really small, but I mean he's decently over 50% as far as winning at showdown goes. And so to convert that into information that you can use, when you're thinking about bluffing somebody, guys that win at showdown a lot and don't go to showdown very often, those are generally very, very bluffable guys. Because when their hand actually gets to showdown, when the cards get flipped up, they have the best hand. First off, they're not going to showdown often, and when they do get to showdown, they have the best hand at a decent frequency, and so that would indicate that they're folding out, their middle range value hands, light value hands, and the such, making them much more bluffable, rather than a guy who, say, like his one at showdown was like 48% and his win to showdown was 25 or 26%. I wouldn't try to bluff a guy like that because he's just too prone to hero call. But to this end, I don't see myself getting thin value here against the opponent here to the right with a showdown of 28%. Now. And this is a sample size thing where there's only 443 hands. Now his one at showdown is very, very high. So and that's another thing you can use this is I might think, oh, I can value bet this guy really thin because he's making lots of hero calls. But then when I look at his one at showdown frequency, I see that his numbers are really, really high, and so he may have just been going to showdown over this sample size just because he had a lot of big hands, and so that number may not be an accurate representation at all. Yeah, that's a bit of an odd. I really didn't expect to see that hand show up ace high in that spot, but it is what it is, and it was nice to get that value out of him on the turn. Once again, this is a situation where I open up the button super light. I have two players that are very high folders in the blinds, and so I'm going to be opening up pretty much any two cards in this particular situation. Now, I hit top pair weak kicker here. Obviously I think I have the best hand here at a very, very high frequency. Something I talked about a little bit earlier is that I have to fight my flop c-bet from getting too high, because I just think there's a ton of like really profitable spots to c-bet either for value or as a bluff. And so whenever I'm in the spot and I have a top pair, a weak top pair type hand, and my hand's not vulnerable to many turn cards, and here's the final factor is my opponent's folds versus a flop C bet fairly often. Now, this particular player folds 47% of the time to a flop C bet. Now, generally speaking, generally speaking, guys are going to be about 5% higher out of position than they are in position when we're talking about regs, and so it's pretty safe to assume that he's folding about half the time on the flop here. If I get called, I probably have the second best hand here anyway. And then also a consideration here is his raise. His flop raise is fairly high, and so I've got to be a little bit afraid of betting here and then facing a raise. And so all those together make this a super standard a check back from me. And then there's also another consideration is how stabby is his opponent. How often does he go after weakness? Now his flop stab single raise pot in positions only 43%, which is I would say for regs probably about average. Overall, I think this is really, really low. I think a lot of regs are very, very weak when it comes to stabbing. We can see here we've got a 43, 42, 44 when it comes to regs, which I think is, like I said, average, but I think it's low. And I think being higher, like this guy's 63 and this guy's 50, much more profitable, because most guys are, when they give up the initiative in the hand, when they miss one of their C bets, they're generally check folding in that spot close to 60% of the time. So I check back for all the reasons I just stated. I take a little stab at the pot, hoping for a call. I get what I want. Now I'm obviously concerned because the backdoor flush got there. I mean, obviously that could easily be one of his hands. Could be one of my hands also. Now I got to think about value betting. What do I get value from? And so, like I talked about in I believe it was the last hand, is I look at an opponent's showdown. Now this particular opponent has been going to showdown 27% of the time, which is it's just a bit on the high side when it comes to regs. Although the sample size is fairly small. Given how I played the hand, I don't think he gives me many credit for kings. He'll probably be more worried about me maybe thin value betting, like somehow I got there with the queen, because I'm trying to get value out of some sort of like ace five type of hand. And so this is very common for me, is I just put in a half pot bet here, just trying to mess with him and squeeze a call out of him. And what I find, because I just think the guys, and it's a little bit of a protection bet too, because it's quite possible he got the backdoor clubs there. He quite possibly can't have a better kicker when it comes to a king, although I would have expected that hand to lead out on the turn quite a bit. So I do think a ton of his range is going to be either backdoor clubs or the 3-5 or the 6, and I have no problem here half potting this and then folding to a raise. I just don't feel like guys are able to come after weakness frequently enough for me to worry that I induced it. Now I used to worry a lot about that, and I couldn't make these bets because I would always talk myself into calling, and so I'd have to bet big here, like 2/3 or 3/4 pot, and that way if they raised, then I could feel really certain that I was beat. But I've fortunately grown out of that, and a lot of it is a result of analyzing a lot of players' hands and just seeing how frequently guys are able to bluff here when you induce that, and most players, even at the 200, 400 level, just simply aren't. And if they are, they'll usually stick out. Now, one stat that I do like is the sixth one down, one at showdown with river raise. Now, obviously it's going to take a few thousand hands to get a decent sample size here, but usually this will tell the story if they're capable of bluff raise in the river. And guys who are capable of bluff raise in the river will have a one at showdown of usually around 50%, and that's usually the spot where I'm actually betting small in order to induce, fully intending on calling it off. Whereas most regs are probably going to be in the 70 to 80% range, and it's almost all value. I mean, the only time they're losing is the very, very occasional bluff, and when they are actually value cutting themselves. They think they're raising with the best hand, with the second or third nuts, and their opponent actually has the nuts, and they end up not winning at showdown in that particular situation. So yeah, I go ahead and half pot it, fully intending to fold to a raise, and manage to get a call out of ace 6. I wanted to just talk about this situation here real quickly because I'm faced with a lot of these type of pro short stackers, depending on what your site's minimum buy-in is. Uh, Obviously, they're buying in for the minimum, and I've seen their game switch to what we see here, opening up tons of hands, particularly if we look at their button and small blind opens extremely high. Consequently, their fold to three bets are fairly high in those spots too. What I've learned with these guys here is I go after them insanely wide, tons of bluffing, and I really expand my value ranges because these guys aren't dumb. No question, these are guys that are reasonably intelligent, and they're not just playing just automatically robotically where you can three bet them 25% of the time and expect them to keep folding. And so what I do with them, it's kind of funny, is I see the pattern. It's just like it's the clearest thing I see is once they see what I'm doing versus them, what they start doing is they start rejamming light. Now I've seen two responses. Now I would say year and a half, 2 years ago, what I was seeing a lot of is they would flat my three bet and then jam over my C bets on every flop. So I was continuing to do what I was doing, and then I was basically betting ace high base. If I was C betting, I was calling it off. So I was C betting good ace highs and obviously made hands and then calling off their jams. What I've seen more over the last 6 months is they start taking Broadway hands, ace X hands, along with all their value hands, and start jamming on me. Last night, I swear to God, I got jammed on like 5 or 6 times with like Queen 10 and Ace 5 and hands like that. Now, if you keep a heavy value range and lots of bluffs, they're countering that correctly. But as soon as I feel like somebody has had enough of what I'm doing, because what I do is I just take a lot of just like complete trash, 4-7 offsuit. A lot of times I just three bet them to, like, say they open to 5, I'll three bet them to 14. In this particular situation, I took it to 15. But then I'm playing with stacks. I'll play for stacks with like ace 10, possibly king queen, lower down my bluff frequency a little bit, but still have lots of bluffs in there because I still think they're folding at an exploitable frequency, but then just really expand my value range there and catch out those light jams, and that works really well with them. You just have to kind of pay attention a little bit to what level they're on, but they're definitely cognizant of the guys who are doing what I'm doing, which is three betting them, probably 20, if not 25% of the time, and then once they kind of catch on, then I slow down a little bit and then stack off really lightly. All right, here's a hand where I isolate a limper, and then I get three bet by a guy who over 365 hands has just been absolutely relentless when it comes to three betting. Additionally, he's fairly relentless when it comes to barreling. If we specifically pop up his numbers, we can see that on the flop, heads up, he's three bet 5 out of 5 times, 2 out of 2 times on the turn, but then 0 out of 2 times on the river. Now I'm slightly infamous for not folding to three bets. There's no way I'm folding in this spot. His range is super wide here, and I feel like I can pick off some bluffs if I catch a piece of this. And luckily, so far, he has given up on the river. I mean, a triple barrel of 0 out of 2 times on the river, but I mean, that's only a sample size of 2. If we look at his overall barrel numbers, though, they kind of reflect that: 83 on the flop, 80 on the turn, 25 on the river, and single raised pot. So that kind of helps confirm that that's kind of the lines he takes is fire twice and then give up on the river. So like let's say I call here and I flop an ace, and he fires twice. I'm obviously going to call it twice, and then he fires that river. I'm going to have a very tough decision to make on the river. I mean, Vortex will play a part of it, but I don't expect. I mean, from what I see, this guy's not firing that third barrel as a bluff, and he's probably not doing it super light. So that's one of the troubles with calling here. But I'm definitely calling two streets here if I can catch a piece of this. I can also consider some options like bluff raising. So far, it looks like he's folded. Um, what two out of six times out of position, one out of two times to a check raise in a single raise pot, and then 0 out of 1 times in a 3-bet pot. So yeah, it doesn't look like flop raising as bluff is a possibility. I just need to catch a piece of this now. Given his barrel frequencies, I'm not going to have the opportunity to float here with this hand, which I mean that's why I would prefer, suited hands obviously over offsuit hands. It just gives you more ability to float against guys that are higher barrelers. But I still think his range is so super wide, and his flop and turn barrels are so high that I can just sit here, call his 3-bet, wait to hit a pair, and pick up enough money from those two barrels to make up for all the times that I miss, and end up actually folding the best hand on the flop. Not super profitable, but I think decently profitable. Luckily, I was able to catch my ace. And then, as hoped, he does not fire that river barrel. As far as firing myself, I mean, there's just not a lot that I beat at this point. His showdown's very high, so I mean, I wonder if he had like an ace eight, well, ace two through ace eight, because the ace five and ace seven got counterfeited. If he does end up a check calling there, let's see what his one at showdown is. Yeah, his one at showdown, no smalls, only 43%. Given that, I think if he had an ace king or ace queen, he most likely goes ahead and barrels those for value, and he might just a check call me here with a weaker ace. Although I think that's not a good call against most players. It's not a good call against me. There's just nothing I get there on the river that I need to turn into a bluff. Although I'm perfectly capable of it. Well, I mean that's not quite true. If I had something like pocket tens. I probably would call this guy twice, and then I might consider against some players, I would consider that turning into a bluff to fold out like a weak ace, but I would never against this player, which means that if I couldn't bluff in this situation, I probably should be value betting an ace jack. I mean, if I had ace queen in this spot, clear value bet, because I think I get called by ace jack, ace 10. Part of my assumption is a lot of players aren't going to call weaker than ace 10, but with this guy's high showdown and low one at showdown tends to make me think that he makes lots of mistakes in that area as far as calling in spots that he shouldn't. So I think a bet rather than my check here would have been the way to go. And he ended up having specifically ace 10, which I think I would have almost certainly gotten value from, but I wasn't really questioning that. It's more ace 8 and under, and also sometimes these guys will have like pocket kings here and just hero call you. I've seen that more than a few times. So I've replayed similar hands of this in some of the previous hands, but I think it's important to hammer point this home. So this is a situation where someone min opens, they're opening up a really wide range. They're not c-betting at all, 43% of the time. I've got pocket eights here. I can check, and if the guy bets, I mean, what do? I mean, against such a tight range, pretty hard to check raise. I don't think check calling's that good. What I think happens most of the time is he bets when he has the best hand, and then he checks back and takes 3 or 6 outs worth of free equity. And so against this player type, in my mind, there's only one play here and one play only, and that's donking out. Not only do you not allow him to take away the free equity, I feel fairly certain in saying that you're going to get calls from hands that would not c bet themselves. For example, no question this guy can have hands like 6-7, ace-7, ace-5, 4-5, 5-6, all that stuff in his range. They won't c bet those hands, but they're not going to fold versus my donk bet either. I'm really not slowing down. I mean, I don't like the seven pairing very much because he could, definitely part of his range is seven, part of his range is a 10, along with overpair stuff like that. If you notice, I make my bet here fairly small. It's kind of a protection bet, and also making sure that I get value from as wide as range as possible from him. I don't want to do a big bet size and then push him off all the hands that I beat, and then especially what's called splitting his range, where my bet sizing folds out everything I beat, and I'm only left with getting called or raised by hands that beat me. I'm sorry, almost no matter the river, I'm probably going to be check folding on the river. As it turns out, it's a 10. I'm a little bit concerned here that if the guy has pocket twos, threes, fours, or sixes, that he turns the hand or 5x, that because he doesn't have showdown value, he turns the hand into a bluff, and so I have to think about check calling here. But I find again and again, and I really haven't shown a ton of these spots, but a lot of opponents' abilities to bluff the river in these situations is not very good. They're just a lot of players just live in fear of you laying a trap and getting caught here, and you mostly just have to be afraid of hands that just have no showdown value whatsoever and an aggressive opponent, which this guy does have a very, very high bet river, and that's why if you bet here, I would strongly consider a call here. Not that he can get to the river with air that much, but just that whatever he had got counterfeited, and now he feels he has to bluff in order to take it down. As it turns out, he had ace queen, and so I really feel like his stats indicate that he would not have c-bet those on his own. He wouldn't have voluntarily opened the action had I checked, and I would have just been giving away 15% equity to him. But by betting there, I was able to get two streets worth of action, which is, I mean, getting two streets worth of action is a little bit surprising out of ace high in this spot, but I definitely can see it, out of 5x's. And if ace high is getting action, then so's, all those pocket pairs under my pocket eights and 5x type hands. So that's why donking in this particular low flop c-bet, or against this type of low flop c-bet opponent, particularly when they're showdown bound, is such a better line than check calling, or I couldn't imagine anybody trying to check raise this guy, but I certainly think donking's way better than that if that's a possible play you would consider. Here's just a slightly interesting spot. Normally my button opening sizing is 2.5 big blinds, but when I have somebody in the blinds that simply isn't folding and I'm forced to go with a much more value oriented range, I'm going to up my size to 3 or 3.5x. I don't think it makes any difference to their calling frequency, but I just get a lot more value out of my hands. He donks out to me, a very heavy donker at 27% over a decent sample size. I'm really not that excited to play for stacks here. I think no question the play here is to call. A card I really didn't want to see rolls off the 9, kind of makes some two pair hands. Obviously, a jack makes a straight. I basically put in a protection bet. I want to protect against hearts, random gutters, stuff like that. I don't want to give him a free card to stuff like that. And also, I want to control how much money's going into the pot. I don't want to check back here, have the river, be the two of diamonds, and him putting a big bet into there, and me having to make a really tough decision in that spot. And so I choose just to go ahead and bet here. If he raises, I'm obviously done. If he calls, then that's the last money I'm putting in the pot. Now here's an interesting three bet defense spot where stats made all the difference. So obviously I've got a very, very low value hand. I'm opening up very wide for reasons I've stated previously. They fold a lot in the blind. So if we just look at this player, he looks like a terrible player to defend against. He has an overall three bet of only 6%. Doesn't seem to barrel a lot, although I mean that's a little bit in our benefit, but if his three bet range is starting out tight, there's just not a lot of floating we can do, and we really need, for a hand like this to work, we really need the ability to float fairly widely. But if we start looking at pop-ups, a different story appears. First off, we can see that this player, over a reasonable sample size, has three bet a ton out of the small blind. So while his overall three bet's quite low, it would appear that specifically in this spot, small blind versus the button, he has a very, very wide range. And without paying close attention to stats, you would never be aware of that. Now, additionally, we can see his c-betting frequency in single race pots is not very good. But once again, if we pop it up, we can see that on the flop, he's fired 6 out of 7 flops. And then on the turn, he's only fired 1 out of 3. Now, the sample sizes are getting a little bit small at this point, but, it's still a good reflection that overall, this guy's three betting quite widely out of the small blind versus the button. And in general, he's firing lots of flops and then slowing down on the turn. And in the backup, all that up, we can see that in single race pots, his check fold on the flop is 75%. If we look at his pop up, yeah, we can see just an overall, a general philosophy of just when he checks, he's giving up. We can see 75% on the flop, 100% on the turn, and 100% on the river. Now, those are all single race pots. Now, additionally, if you look down there in the middle on the red, his check fold the turn in three bet pots, 2 out of 2 for 100%. Now, this is not a Hold'em Manager 2 stat. This is actually something I made in NoteCaddy. But all that additional information, that allows me to defend in a situation that just normally looking at his HUD, I wouldn't be able to do. And I'm not necessarily saying that even given all that information that my defense is that good. I mean, all I have is 2 suited cards, and generally I reserve these type of defenses against guys who are a little bit more out of control. Now 17% in the small blind, if his number's accurate, is high enough for me, but I would like to see like 17% in the big blind too. And that way I feel like there's some confirmation that he's super wide, but still, sample size is 65, 17%. That's getting to the point where I feel okay about this. I mean, obviously, if I had something like 5-6 suited, 5-7 suited, even 5-8 suited, since being semi-connected would be better. But still, given everything that we see, his range is wide. He bets once, and then he gives up and check folds. That just allows so many more options into your range, and so I tend to defend here very widely with suited type of hands. Now, I flop a backdoor flush draw. A 7 will give me an open-ended straight draw. That's enough for me to go in, float here, and then hope either on the turn I pick up a 7 or a heart, or he checks, and then I can bet and then take it down. Well, luckily, I pick up a heart, and he checks, and I bet, and he ends up check folding, following the pattern that we saw in his HUD. Now, once again, this is a really, really light defense, but I thought it was a really good example of being able to take a closer look at a player, seeing what he's doing in specific spots, and then being able to expand our ranges, although I don't necessarily recommend expanding your ranges this far, as far as just like a really weak suited defense hand. Alright, one last hand to finish this particular video up. Man, it is tough to find these hands. I feel like I've gone through about 100 of them just looking for an interesting spot. This is a spot we've talked about a little bit earlier, except the other side of the coin where the opponent's fold to 4 bet was extremely high, and so we ended up flatting pocket nines rather than 4 bet them. And even though we would have gotten lots of folds, if they would have jammed, we would have been in very bad shape. Now we have the opposite issue, where we have an opponent who, over a decent sample size, 518 hands, has a really solid 3-bet. You can just barely see it at the top of your screen, but their big blind 3-bet versus the button is 20% out of 20 chances and 15% out of 27 opportunities in the small blind. But I mean, those sample sizes are fairly small, but taken as a whole, this guy's 3-betting a lot, and he's yet to fold to a 4-bet. It looks like he's been faced with I don't know, eight 4-bets, and he hasn't folded any of them. Now this is, as far as folding to 4-bet, I mean, that's pretty borderline, but still 0 out of 8 folds with a fairly high 3-bet would indicate to me that this is the perfect guy to extend my value ranges against, and so I would be looking to 4-bet for value, ace, queen, pocket nines, as of right now. Now, as I get larger sample sizes, say I have 3,000 hands, maybe I'd drop down to pocket eights or something like that. But for right now, I'd say pocket nines and ace queen. Basically, my thought being is he's 3-betting very wide. So far, hasn't been folding to 4-bets, which means he must be 5-bet jamming. Not that he must, that there's a decent probability that he's 5-bet jamming, ace X's, mid pocket pairs, stuff like that, in which my pocket tens do very, very well against. And so I basically 4-bet, induce the jam, and then call. And you always hate to see the king on the flop. And he ends up having ace queen, which, I mean, decent hand, but clearly, I mean, it does back up what my feeling was, is that the guy was able to 5-bet jam light. Now, is he necessarily able to do it with, say, like an ace 5 suited or pocket sixes or something like that? We really don't know at this point, but definitely seeing ace queen there is a nice confirmation of what I was saying. Now, if he's only doing it with, say, tens or better, and then ace queen, then obviously my pocket nines, pocket tens raised to induce isn't quite as good. I mean, you really would like to see a few mid pocket pairs and even and then possibly like an ace X suited type hand. Although I'm not feeling that great about that. Mainly, I just want to feel like, and I do feel like, if people are using ace queen suited, then they're also using mid pocket pairs. It'd be fairly unusual for a guy to only use ace queen type hands, and not use mid pocket pairs. So, and that's why it makes the nines and tens particularly good in this spot. Well, we're a little past 45 minutes, so I'm going to go and end this here. I don't know how many more videos I'll do. Maybe I can get another 2 videos out of this. We'll just see. I'll keep replaying hands and see how many I can find. But as always, I hope you guys found this educational and useful. And if you have any questions, comments, or critiques, put them in the comments and I'll catch them there. Thanks. Good luck.